Hello everyone, welcome to Coding with Ivan. Welcome to the fifth part of the Android food recipe app tutorial. So in this video we're going to add some more features to our app, but before that let's see the status of our app. So if I open the app, as you can see it's loading all the recipes here, and we added the search view and the meal tags here, and also in the last video we added a on-click listener for each of the items. So if I select this one, then it will load the recipe in a new activity, and here we got the image, the description and the ingredients of that recipe. So in this video we're going to mainly add a new recycler view right under this description, where we will show all the similar recipes to this particular recipe. Okay, so let's get started. For these, at first we need to go to our recipe details activities layout file. So at first let me close all of these items and let's go inside the layout folder inside the activity recipe details.xml, and here we will add a new recycler view right under this description or the summary. So under this summary text view we'll add a new recycler view. I'll set its width to match parent and height to wrap content here. Let's close this recycler view tag, and I'll give this recycler view an ID. I'll call this as recycler underscore meal underscore similar. Okay, and I'll also give this recycler view a overall margin of 8 dp. Alright, so that's our recycler view. Let's initialize that inside our recipe detail activity. So I'll copy its ID from here, go to this recipe details activity, and here at the top besides this recycler meal ingredients I'll paste its ID. Let me zoom in. So here I'll add a comma and paste the ID here, and we need to initialize it inside the onCreate method, inside the find views method actually. So here right after this recycler meal ingredients I'll go to a new line and I'll call this recycler meal similar equals find view by id r.id dot the recycler meal similar. Alright, so now we need to call a new API to get the similar recipes. For this we'll go to the documentation of the Spoonacular API, and here we'll go inside this get similar recipes endpoint. As you can see, here is our similar recipes URL, API URL, and this is a response. So let's integrate this endpoint inside our Android Studio. So for this, inside our Android Studio we have to go inside this request manager class, and here we'll go under this interfaces, and we need to create a separate interface for that similar recipes. So here I'll go to a new line here right under this call recipe details, and we'll create a new interface, private interface. I'll name this as call similar recipes. Okay, and inside this interface's body we'll define our call method. So here at first, if we go to our API documentation, as you can see, for the similar recipes our API calling method is get, and this is the URL endpoint. So from here I'll just copy the endpoint, this part I'll copy this, go back to Android Studio, and here I'll create a new get annotation, and inside the parameter of get we'll paste our endpoint. Okay, and then we'll create our call method. So our call method is for the response. Okay, so we need to create a custom model for the response. So for the model, if we go again to the documentation, here we got a example response. So we'll create a Java model class from this response. So I'll just copy the whole response from here and go to the website json to csharp.com/json to pojo. I'll give the link of this in the description. From there you will visit that and just paste the response that we copied from here. I'll just paste it here and click on convert. Okay, so here we got the response, and as you can see our response is a list, and this list contains these objects. and this is the Java class of that particular object. Okay, so let's go to our Android Studio again and create a new model class. So here, right into this models package, I'll create a new Java class. I'll call this as similar recipe response. Okay, and hit enter, and here inside this class's body I'll paste the objects of this root class. I'll copy them and paste them inside here. Okay, and inside the request manager, as I have told you earlier that our response is a list, so we have to call this as a list of this similar recipe response. Similar recipe response. Okay, and I'll name this method as call similar recipe. Okay, and then inside the parameter of this method we need to pass, if we go into the documentation now, as you can see inside the parameters we have this ID, number and limit license. So in this example we'll only use the ID and the number. Okay, so here for the ID we need to pass the specific food recipes ID for which we are fetching the similar recipes for, and the number is the total number of random similar recipes that we want to fetch, and that should be between 1 and 100. Okay, so let's add them. At first I'll copy this ID from here, go back to Android Studio, and here I'll create a new path, because as you can see our ID here is embedded in the URLs path. So here I'll pass the ID. Okay, and for the ID again I'll pass an integer value called ID. Okay, and then for the number it's a query. I'll copy this and get back to Android Studio, and here I'll pass this as a query and paste that number here, and this will be a string. I'll call this as number. Okay, and after that we need to pass our API key as always. So here I'll write @query, and here for the API key I'm copying this from here. Okay, string API key. Alright, and we need to pass a semicolon right here. So this is our interface for the call similar recipes. Now we'll create a method for that interface. So I'll go right after this get recipe details and create a new public void get similar recipes method. Okay, and inside the parameter at first we need to pass the listener. So I'll create a custom listener here. So right inside this listeners package I'll create a new Java class. I'll call this as similar recipes listener. Okay, that will be an interface, and inside here I'll create a new method void did fetch, and this should return a list of similar recipe response. Okay, it's showing an error because we need to import the class. Okay, and I'll call this list of similar recipe response as response. Okay, and then for the second parameter I'll pass a message which is a string. All right, and then we'll create another method for the error. So I'll write did error, and here I'll only pass the message. Okay, so that's it for the similar recipes listener. So I'll pass the object of this similar recipes listener right here, similar recipes listener. I'll call this as listener. Okay, and then we need to pass the ID. So I'll require also an integer ID. Okay, and okay, let's create this method body here, because for the number we'll pass a static number. hard-coded in our method. Okay, you can also pass this with the parameter, but I am not doing this here. So here at first we need to create an instance of this call similar recipes interface. So I'll write call similar recipes. I'll name this as call similar recipes equals retrofit dot create call similar recipes dot class. In the new line I'll create a new call object. So I'll write a call for list of similar recipe response. I'll name this as call equals, I'll get this call similar recipes method, call similar recipes dot call similar recipe, and here for the parameter we have to pass the ID and the number and the API key. Okay, so I'll paste them sequentially here. So for this, at first we need to pass the ID. So we are getting the ID from here, from the parameter. So I'll pass the ID from right here, and then for the number I'll pass a hard-coded number of, let's say, let's fetch 4. Okay, let's fetch 4 similar recipes. Okay, and the third parameter is for the API key. So I'll fetch the API key from the string folder. So context.get string r.string.api key. All right, add a semicolon at the end, go to the new line, and here we'll enqueue our call. So I'll write call.enqueue and we'll create a new callback. All right, here we got the onResponse and onFailure method. So inside the onResponse we'll check for if the response is not successful. So I'll write not response dot. So if it is not successful, in that case we'll call the listener dot did error, and here we'll just pass the response message. So let response dot message. Okay, and then we'll return from here. And if it is successful, in that case we'll call the listener dot did fetch, and here we'll pass at first the response. So I'll pass response dot body, and for the second parameter we'll pass the message. So I'll pass response dot message. Okay, and then for the onFailure we'll call the listener dot did error, and we'll pass the throwables message from this t object inside our parameter. So let t dot get message. All right, so that's our method to get the similar recipes. So now we'll go inside our recipe details activity class. Okay, and here we'll call our similar recipes API. So for this I'll go right here, right after this get recipe details. Okay, so here we'll call the manager dot get similar recipes, and here we need to pass the similar recipes listener and the ID. So let's create the similar recipes listener first. So I'll go right after this and create a new private final similar recipes listener. I'll call this as similar recipes listener equals new similar recipes listener, and okay, that's it. And inside this did fetch we'll show our data, and here it's showing an error because here we need to put a semicolon. Okay, so we'll work on showing the data later. At first I'll copy this similar recipe listeners object name and we'll paste it inside the parameter of this manager.get similar recipes. Okay, and for this second parameter we'll pass the ID that we got right here. So we'll pass the ID here. Okay, and so now to show the data inside the recycler view, we need to create a separate adapter class, and we'll also create a new custom layout for the recycler view. So for the custom layout, at first we'll create a new layout resource file inside our layout folder, and we'll call this as list underscore similar underscore recipe. Okay, hit enter, go to the split view, and here we'll make some changes. So at first I'll change the parent layout to a card view. So I'll change this into a card view. For the width I'll pass here wrap content, and for the height I'll pass here also wrap content. Okay, let's add some more attributes to this card view. So I'll add card background color to color white, and then a card elevation of 8 dp, and I'll also give this card view an ID. I'll call this as, let's say, similar recipe underscore holder. Okay, we'll need that to create a on-click listener for these items. So inside the card view I'll create a new linear layout where I'll set its width, let's say 150 dp. Okay, and for the height I'll pass here wrap content. Alright, let's close this linear layout, and here I'll set its orientation to vertical. Alright, and I'll set its gravity to center, and I'll give this a small margin of, let's say, 4 dp. Okay, and then inside this linear layout, at first I'll create a new text view where I'll set its width to match parent and height to wrap content. Okay, let's close this tag, and here for the ID of this text view I'll call this as text view underscore similar underscore title. Okay, and for a demo text I'll write here as similar name, and let's set the text style to be bold here, then change the text color to color orange here. Let's give this a padding of 8 dp, and then let's set the text alignment to be center. Okay, and then let's also give this text view a horizontal scrolling effect. So for this I'll write single line attribute to true, then I'll change the ellipse size to marquee, then the marquee repeat limit to marquee forever, and then scroll horizontally to true. Okay, that's nice. And then under this text view I'll create a new image view to show the recipe image. So I'll create a new image view here. I'll set its width to match parent, and for its height I'll pass, let's say, 60 dp. Okay, let's close this image view tag. I'll give this image view an ID. I'll call this as image view underscore similar. Okay, and then for the scale type I'll pass center crop here. And after this image view we need another text view for showing the serving of that recipe. So let's copy the previous text view from here. So I'll copy this and paste it right under this image view, and I'll just change the ID from this to text view similar underscore serving. Okay, and then for the text style I'll pass here italic, and for the color I'll change it to black. Okay, alright, so now I'll also give a margin to this card view. So let's give this a margin of, let's say, 8 dp. Okay, nice. So now we can start working on our adapter class. So for this I'll go up here into this adapters package and right click on it and create a new Java class. I'll call this as similar recipe adapter. Hit enter. Here we got our similar recipe adapter class, and right after this class we'll create another class for the similar recipe view holder. So I'll write similar recipe view holder. Okay, and I'll make this class extends the default view holder class of Recyclerview. So Recyclerview dot view holder, click on this bulb and click on create constructor matching super, and here we need to create some objects for the views of our custom layout. So here at first we have this card view, so I'll copy the ID of this card view, and inside the adapter I'll create a card view object, and I'll name the object with the ID. And after this card view we have this text view called text view similar title, so I'll copy the ID and paste it here as a text view object. Okay, put a semicolon, and here after that we have an image view. I'll copy its ID and paste it right after this image view. Okay, and after that we have another text view for the text view similar servings, so I'll copy this and paste it right after this text view similar title with a comma. Okay, so now we need to initialize them inside the constructor, so I'll copy the ID of the card view from here and I'll paste it here, equals item view dot find view by ID r dot id dot, I'll paste the ID here. It's showing an error because we need to just press alt enter and our error will be solved. Put a semicolon at the end, and similarly I'll initialize the rest of these objects. Alright, so here I have initialized all the 4 view items, as you can see. So our view holder class is now ready. Now we can start working on our adapter class. So I'll make our adapter class extends the default adapter class of Recyclerview. So I'll make this class extends the Recyclerview dot adapter, and here in the angle bracket we need to pass the view holder class. So I'll copy the view holder class name and paste it right here, and it's showing an error. We just need to click on this bulb and click on implement methods. We'll select all of these 3 and click on OK, and here we got our methods. So at first at the top we'll create some necessary objects. At first I'll create a context object, I'll call this context, and then we need a list of similar recipes, so I'll call a list of similar recipe response. I'll call this as list. Okay, and after that, as we will add a on click listener on this recipe items, so I'll create a new object for the recipe click listener interface. So I'll write recipe click listener, I'll call this as listener. Okay, so these are the 3 required objects. Now we'll create a constructor with these 3. So I'll right click on the empty space, click on generate, click on constructor, and I'll select all of these 3 and click on OK. So here we got our constructor, as you can see. Okay, so now we can start working on our methods. At first we'll go to the onCreate view holder, and instead of null we'll return a new similar recipe view holder. I'll call the layout inflator dot from, pass the context dot inflate r dot layout dot list underscore similar recipe that we just created, and the second parameter for this is the parent, and third one is false. Okay, so that's it. And now inside the onBind view holder we'll show our data, and here at first we'll call the holder dot text view similar title dot set text, and here if we go into the API documentation inside the response body of the get similar recipes, as you can see the recipe name is inside the object called title. Okay, so I'll just call here list dot get from position dot title. All right, so now we got the title, and as we want to give this text view a scrolling effect, so I'll let holder dot text view similar title dot set selected to true. Okay, and after that I'll call the holder dot text view similar serving dot set text, and here again if we go to the documentation, as you can see for the servings here we have the object called servings. Okay, so I'll go to the Android Studio, and here I'll call list dot get from position dot servings, and we'll append a new string. I'll call this as persons. Okay, add a semicolon at the end. Okay, and then we will show the image of that recipe. So we're going to use Picasso for that. So Picasso dot get dot load, and here for the URL, if we go to the API documentation, as you can see, we only got the image ID, sorry, the recipe ID and the image type, which is JPG, but we don't have the full link here. So for the link, if we scroll down a little bit, and we have to go inside the guides and inside this show images, and right under this recipes, as you can see here, we have the documentation to call the images of a recipe. So the URL is https://recipe images, and after that we have to pass the ID dash the size dot the type of that image. Okay, so for the size, here are some sizes that the API can return. Okay, and for the ID we will get that from the API, and for the type we'll also get that from the API. So I'm just going to copy the URL till this point. I'll copy this, get back to Android Studio, and here inside the loads parameter I'll paste it inside a quotation. Okay, and after that, as you can see, we have to pass the ID. So for the ID, I'll go outside this quotation and write plus list dot get from position dot ID. Okay, and after the ID we have to add dash and the size. So for the size, we are going to use this 556 into 370. Okay, so I'll copy this, and as you can see here, we need to pass the size with a dash before. So here, right after this ID, I'll append a new string. At first I'll add the dash, and then I'll paste the size. And then if we go into the documentation, as you can see, after this size we have to pass dot file type or the image type. Okay, so if we go into the get similar recipes documentation, as you can see, we got the image type here inside the object called image type, but here we don't have any dot here at first of this JPG, so we'll add that manually. So let's get back to Android Studio, and here after this 556 into 370 I'll add a dot, and then after this I'll append the extension of that image. So I'll write list dot get from position dot image type. Okay, and after that I'll write dot into, and here inside the parameter of into we'll pass the image view where we want to show that image. So I'll write holder dot image view similar. Okay, after that I'll go to a new line, and here I'll create a on click listener for the card view. As you can see here, we have the card view similar recipe holder. So I'll write holder dot similar recipe holder dot set on click listener new view dot on click listener, and here we'll call our listener that we passed right here. So I'll call the listener dot on recipe clicked, and here we'll just pass the ID of that recipe. So I'll write list dot get from holder dot get adapter position dot ID. Okay, and as our ID is in integer form, we have to cast this into a string. So here I'll write string dot value of, and inside the parameter of value of I'll pass this whole ID. I'll copy this and paste it inside here. Okay, so our onBind view holder is ready. Now we'll go inside this get item count and make sure to change this return 0 to return list dot size. Okay, so our adapter class is now ready. Now we can work on the recipe details activity class. So here at top, at first we'll create a new object for the similar recipe adapter. So I'll call this similar recipe adapter. I'll call this as similar recipe adapter. And we have already initialized our recycler view mill similar here. So we'll go right into this listener of the similar recipe listener and insert the did fetch method. At first I'll call the recycler mill similar dot set has fixed size to true, and then we'll add a layout manager for this recycler view. So let recycler mill similar dot set layout manager new linear layout manager, and here for the first parameter I'll pass the context. So the context is recipe details activity dot class dot this. Okay, and then the second parameter is the orientation. So the orientation is linear layout manager dot horizontal, and the third parameter is false. Okay, so that's it for the layout manager. And then we'll create an object for the adapter that we created. So we'll call the similar recipe adapter equals new similar recipe adapter, and here at first for the context I'll pass again the recipe details activity dot this, and the second parameter is the list of similar recipe response. So we got that here as the parameter response, so we'll pass the response. The third parameter is the listener, recipe click listener. So we need to create a separate listener for that. So here right after this similar recipe listener I'll create another private final recipe click listener. I'll call this as recipe click listener equals new recipe click listener, and here we'll put a semicolon at the end, and then inside the on recipe clicked we'll call the same activity again, but before that let's copy the name of that object recipe click listener, and I'll paste it after this response inside the adapter. Okay, add a semicolon at the end, and then we can attach this attach this similar recipe adapter to this recycler mill similar. So I'll write recycler mill similar dot set adapter, and here we'll pass this similar recipe adapter object. I'll paste that here. Okay, and here inside this recipe click listeners on recipe clicked method, right now let's show a toast message for example. So toast dot make text, and here for the context I'll pass recipe detail activity dot this, and here for the text I'll only pass the ID. So I'll write ID here. Okay, so now let's run our application once to see the changes, but before that let's add the add some code inside the did error. So here I'll only show a toast message, toast recipe details activity dot this. For the text I'll pass this message. Okay, so let's run our application now. As you can see, our app is now installed, and here we got all the recipes. Let's select this one. I'll select this one. So here we got the details activity, and if we scroll down here, as you can see, we got the similar recipes. Okay, so here right above this we can add a text view like this which will say similar recipes. We'll add that later. Okay, so here it's showing the image, the name of that recipe, and the total servings. Okay, and if we click on any one of them, it shows a toast message with the ID. Okay, let's try again. Let's click on this one, ID, this one, ID. Okay, so now let's make some more changes as our app is working fine as expected. So here I'll go inside this recipe on recipe clicked. Let me close that, and here instead of showing just a toast message, I'll just reload this activity. So for this I'll call start activity, and here I'll pass a new intent from recipe details activity dot this to recipe details activity dot class, and here right after this I'll go to a new line here and I'll write dot put extra, and here I'll again pass the ID like this. Okay, so make sure to add this. So what that will do is whenever the user will click on any similar recipe, it will load the exact activity again with that particular ID of that recipe that he clicked. Okay, so now let's do another change inside the UI. So I'll go inside the activity recipe details, and here right above this recycler view I'll add another text view like this, like the ingredients. So I'll copy this and paste it right above this recycler view, and I'll just change the text here from ingredients to similar recipes. Okay, so let's run our application again. Okay, so our app is now installed. Here are all the recipes. So let's click on this one. Okay, and here we got the details, and under this we got the similar recipes. Here are the similar recipes. Okay, it's showing 4 results because we passed 4, as you can see inside the request manager we passed here 4. So if you want to show more similar recipes, you can pass any number here between 1 to 100. Okay, so now if we click on any of these recipes, so let's click on this one. So it loaded that recipe here. Okay, so our app is working fine, and that's it for this part of the video. In the next part we'll add a step-by-step guide of that recipe. So we'll integrate a new API in the next video, and thank you so much for watching, guys.